it's too low-key a start, so this is not the real one. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. Let me explain what this show is. I have done a new show every year at this comedy festival for the last 8 years. This is the greatest hits amalgamation version of those previous 8 shows. If you want to see new material, the next hour will be tremendous. I'd like to give you some context as to the previous shows. Show number 5 in 2015, whenever that one wasn't very good. Wasn't great. Every show gets judged for the awards at the comedy festival, and that year I was so bad I was actually in deficit an award, and they came round my house and removed a chess trophy I won at school. So balanced out. So basically, I've been touring this show for the last 3 months around people's living rooms because the career is going supremely. And basically, the intention of tonight is to film this show so that I can send it to agents and producers and stuff and try and get signed and therefore actually have a career as opposed to play to 5 people, as is my tradition. So basically, what I'm therefore asking you is to do me a couple of favours. If you hear something that was clearly intended to be a joke, do laugh. There's quite a range of microphones and things around the place to pick up your laughter particularly, so that would be very helpful. Even if you don't think it's funny, fake laughter sounds just as good as real laughter, so seems fine by me. I'm willing to compromise. One thing I will say is that because I've been playing people's living rooms quite a lot recently, I've found that people have treated it more like a living room and less like a gig. And therefore, because I take quite a lot of dramatic pauses before the punchlines, people have taken that as an opportunity to start a conversation. If I could give you one piece of major advice going into this show, it would be, don't fucking do that. It's very annoying, very annoying. I'm going to take a lot of them. So that's pretty much all the notices. As I say, do stay for the next show after this one, mainly because that's really going to need momentum. I'm cool with it, I'm cool. Basically what I thought we'd do is I will now go and stand over there and then they'll play an actual intro thing so it will sound like I know what I'm doing. And then I'll come back out. But what we're going to do first is I'm just going to establish the level of clapping and cheering that should come with this. So we'll start, if you wouldn't mind, sir, if you'd start a gentle golf clap for me. I realise I've picked a man holding a beer. And then if you just spread that across the front row and then weave it up. There we go, lovely. This will interfere with the microphones horribly, but if you could stamp a little bit and join that in, there you go. And then some whooping. And then massive applause. Okay, that's the level. So there is where we're aiming for. So when it says, the thing will say my name in a moment, when that happens, if you could maintain that until I take the microphone out of the stand, I'm not going to milk it, don't worry. But if you can maintain that, it'll look like we're doing an actual show. As opposed to just, it's Saturday night, let's take a punt on the tall fella, shall we? Are you alright with that? Yeah! Okay, here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom Young.
Hello! Are you in good form?
Yeah!
Cheer if you've never seen me before.
Yeah!
If you've never seen me before.
Yeah!
Cheer for no reason.
Yeah!
Go ooh. Go ah. Go ah, but like a pirate.
Arr!
Go ah, but like a confused Scooby-Doo. I mean, I'll never tire of that. It's February, that's about the 18th time I've done it so far this year. Still loving it. Good, thank you very much for coming. Let me explain one tiny thing that you may have already noticed about this show. I have no memory. And as such, have my notes. It's a very long show, I can't remember all of it. It's all in a weird order, not really learned. So I have these here. I have had previous alternative solutions to that, which is that I decided I could learn Chinese. I'll explain. What I thought I could do is learn Chinese and then tattoo my set down my arm in Chinese, and I'd be able to read it and no one would know what I was doing. The only problem with that is after you do your first full-length show, because then for the next show you've got to put it on the other arm, and then the third year on the leg, and basically by the fifth year, much shorter show. Or much smaller writing, one of those. Some people think that that joke is about me having a small penis. Technically, all that joke says is that my penis is shorter than my legs, which I think is reasonable, to be honest with you. I do have very long legs, although they are rather thin. The next thing you probably will have noticed at this early stage is the outfit. The outfit is essentially a fancy dress costume from a party I went to 9 years ago now. The theme for said party was actually pirates. But I went like this as an investment banker, so that worked out fine. Any investment bankers in? They're all out burying treasure. Or touching a woman at a charity dinner. It's not okay. The problem with dressing like this when you do stand-up is that every once in a while your gigs get filmed and then those videos end up on YouTube, and as some of you may be aware, YouTube is a world of twats waiting to comment on you. This was brought home to me a few years back when I did the Chortle Student Comedian of the Year Award in 2010. Been doing this joke a while. And the video of that remains on YouTube to this day because I feel like it has to be saved for posterity. It has one comment on it, and that comment is in 2 sentences, one more alarming than the other. The first is, he looks like Peter Crouch on his way to court. And the second, underneath that, says, possibly on a rape charge. That's what you want to know, isn't it? That you look like a rapey footballer. The next thing that I feel I should draw attention to is the beard. I'm aware that the beard's a bit shit, but I had to grow the beard because women aren't attracted to me and I needed a reason to justify that to myself. Hence the beard. I recently bought myself a beard trimmer just to try and maintain the beard. As is typical of when you hand any man any gadget, he immediately wishes to play with it, and therefore, as is quite predictable, every hair on my body is currently this length or shorter. Just a little visual image for you to start the show with. The initial beard joke's quite useful for me because generally speaking one of 3 things happens. Either I go, women aren't attracted to me and I need a reason to justify that to myself and everybody laughs, in which case good, got a big laugh. Or B, it gets an ah, in which case might be in for a chance of a pity shack. Or C, nothing happens at all, in which case obviously looking a bit tasty that particular evening, so thank you for your laugh. By now, I would imagine many of you will be thinking, this is all very well, Tom, but for God's sake, what do you do for money? I used to work as a teaching assistant at my old high school. I was gone for a grand total of 6 weeks between graduating as a student and returning as a member of staff. That's weird. But as a result of that, I was quite young when I went for the interview, and they said, now Tom, obviously if you got the job, you'd be a very young member of staff. What would you do if any of the female students took a shine to you? And I said, well, that's not happened at any time in the last 4 years, so I'd be surprised if it happened now. And they gave me the job. It's quite a good job. The only problem with it is that if any of the kids say anything funny, you've got to look responsible at all times, so you're not allowed to laugh. I was doing really well with that for about 4 months, and then one day, the English teacher whose class I was in with, she stood up in front of the room and went, right kids, can anybody tell me what was invented before the radio? One of the boys went, squirrels. And I pissed myself, I don't mind telling you it's one of the greatest pieces of timing I've ever seen to this day. He's not even wrong. I then left there because I was on a 1-year contract. I went to university. I went to the University of Northampton. Northampton is a fascinating town, one of the few that I've been to that has a Brazilian restaurant. I've still never been, but apparently all the food comes in very thin strips. What I enjoy about that joke is that when I was younger, people were more willing to accept it from me, and now as I've got older and in theory more mature, people just look at me and go, no. I studied creative writing at university. Ridiculous degree, don't do it. They can teach you all of it in 2 years, they don't need the third one. However, the most interesting thing that I wrote during the 3 years that I was there was a poem called Operation, which was based on the board game. Not a huge number of people turning board games into poetry, but I'm the one! I won't do the whole thing because it's quite long, but basically the first stanza, excuse me, the first stanza goes, my gran needed an operation and I'd played numerous games, so to her great surprise one day I hooked her up to the mains. I won't do the whole thing, it's quite long, but by the end of it I brushed her with the tweezers and she's dead. So, cheery. I then graduated from the University of Northampton, this is true, reapplied for my old job as a teaching assistant, didn't get it. Not even called to the interview, so £9 well spent. But I'm not bitter, I'm not bitter. The other thing you will probably have noticed about me is I'm a very tall man, 6'7", in case you're interested. We can always tell when you're faking it. I have no real problem with being this tall, except for the fact that I am omitted by political correctness. There are two groups in society that it seems to be perfectly acceptable to make jokes about and nobody bats an eyelid. These are tall people, and as you may have noticed from the beard, ginger people. This was a problem that was brought home to me when this magazine came out. Now, you won't all be able to see this photo, I'm afraid. This photo is, within this magazine, is a picture of me and my friend Becky, who, due to a medical condition, as some of you will be able to see, is 2.5 feet shorter than me. As a result of that, Becky comes up to about here next to me, and they've chosen to run the photo of the two of us under the headline, Becky loses her fear of heights. I'm not even in the article. There's no reason for them to have put me in that at all. Well, I think that's inappropriate. You can't judge people based on the physical characteristics that they can't control. I mean, if I was black, they'd never have put that picture under the headline, Becky loses her fear of the dark. Would they? It's not okay. It's not okay. And there's all sorts of other groups in society that you can't make those kind of lazy comments about. You can't go up to a blind man in the street with his guide dog and go, that's a nice dog. Always had you down as a cat person. Similarly, you can't go up to somebody with one leg and go, this floor's a bit uneven, isn't it? It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. The real problem with it is that people seem to think that tall men are in constant competition with other tall men in order to see who is taller. No. Well, this was made apparent when I was stood in the Orange Tree on the High Street with a friend of mine called Matt, who is of a similar height to me, and a guy came running up to us and went, ooh, stand back to back, let's see who's taller. I mean, we knew him. Otherwise, that would be weird. But very begrudgingly, we did stand back to back, and this guy goes, oh, Matt's taller, I bet you don't like that, do you? Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, that I don't give a shit. Really doesn't bother me whether I'm the tallest person in the room or not. That's not how it works. We're not competing against each other, we're actually a team, united against the rest of you. That's how it works. That's the strategy. All sorts of random comments I used to get. The one I used to get an awful lot was, oh, you're really tall, do you play basketball? Now it's Britain, so nobody plays basketball. And generally speaking, that's what I used to say back. But I realised that wasn't quite cutting enough, and that I was going to have to find something else. So what I do now is people come up to me and go, oh, you're really tall, do you play basketball? And I look back at the tiny person and go, no, do you play mini golf? And that was working very well for me right up until I joined a basketball team. Really ruined it. I played for a team called the Harbour Dynamos, who are so named because when we're moving, our shirts light up. That is the biggest laugh that's had in about 4 years. But how many jokes do you hear about miniaturised bicycle generators? Virtually none, so I keep doing it, carving out a niche. It's not even true anymore because I got demoted a team, so I had to play for a team called the Harbour Hurricanes. If you don't mind, I'd just like to try some new punchlines for that. We're called the Harbour Hurricanes because we blow. We really are awful. We're called the Harbour Hurricanes because we're full of hot air. No, you're right, that doesn't make sense. It's really about hot air balloons. We're called the Harbour Hurricanes because we once accidentally killed 4 Americans and left hundreds of others injured. Oh, I'll use that one. I started playing basketball way too late. I got scouted in a pub by somebody saying, "Do you play basketball?" So I zinged him with the mini golf line, and then I found out it was genuine. But because I didn't start playing till I was 19, my coordination isn't very good. As a result of that, I can only really dribble the ball with my right hand. And as a result of that, the muscles in my right arm have significantly increased by comparison to the muscles in my left arm, and that's the story I'm sticking with. It's a wanking joke. I don't even want to do it, but every gig has a quota. So, you have to do what you can. It's not just with normal sports though, like basketball, where my height causes me an issue. A little while ago, and in comedy, a little while ago can mean anything up to 10 years. A little while ago, I went indoor skydiving in Milton Keynes. Now, if you've never been, this is basically a giant fan that will blow you up in the air. This experience will cost you £50 for 2 minutes. Correct response. The thing about that is, because we went in Milton Keynes, that you're not just paying for the experience of indoor skydiving, you're paying for the beautiful scenery of Milton Keynes. Some of you have been. So here's where the problem is, right? Because they're concerned that you can't do it in your own clothes for fear that they'll get damaged by the wind, they give you a bright blue jumpsuit to do this in. Now, the only one they had that fitted me was the extra, extra large, which wasn't built height-wise, that was built width-wise. And consequently, I had to get on top of the giant fan with wings from here to here, and between my legs, I look like a flying squirrel. For those keeping count, yes, that is the second reference to squirrels in this set already. A surprisingly rodent-heavy act. What I thought I'd do if I ever went back would be to take with me a load of silver foil, cut it all up into small rectangles, and then just before I go in, throw it all in and shout, "To the Crystal Dome!" I was genuinely worried about that joke because there was a danger that eventually audiences would age out of being able to remember the Crystal Maze and that was going to start getting nothing. But just at a time where that could have happened, Channel 4 brought it back. Hooray! So, it's nice to be out, isn't it? That's a line that has not worked on the living room tour. Didn't think it through. Give me a cheer if you organised coming out for your group this evening. Hey. Well, that's never happened before. Give me a cheer if you were dragged here by somebody else. There you go, yeah. So, the first group are my people, okay? Nothing happens in my social circle unless I'm the person who organises it. I am the organiser for my group of friends. However, let me put it to you that there are only 2 correct responses for any invitation. Would you agree with this? There's either yes or no. Organisers? Yeah. Invitees agree? Yeah. Good. Here's what started happening that I don't think is acceptable. The third option, which is people going, yes, I would like to see that group of people. No, I don't want to do that activity. A little while ago, I organised to go to the Handmade Burger Company with friends of mine, and one of them commented in the Facebook event going, yeah, we could do that, or we could go for a curry instead. To which I responded, fuck off. I'm organising the Handmade Burger Company. If you want to go for a curry, you have to organise it. You're not just allowed to sneak in at the last minute and try and claim the victory. That's not fair. Because scale it up, imagine how rude it actually is. If you rang somebody going, hey mate, can you come to my wedding in Leicester? And they went, oh yeah, we could do that. Or We could go to a funeral in Dorset. It's very rude. It's very rude. It happens a lot to me. I don't really know why. It seems to be the women in my life. I think they don't trust my planning skills. The worst one ever of these was that I text all of my friends saying, "Shall we go and see a film tonight?" Not only did we not see the film that I texted about, we went bowling. Not even close. It's just leading to rudeness from me as well now, because now I'm just sending incredibly specific text messages that say, "I'm going to see this film at this time on this day. If you'd like to join me, I'll be leaving town at this time." And I see a lot of films on my own. It's just more efficient. I, in my life, have had 3 nicknames. The first of them I got when I was 11 at a Christian youth conference. As is typical of any nickname you get when you're 11, to this day, still in my email address. That nickname is Posh Tom. Now, looking at me, you may have already formed some conclusions as to why I've been called Posh Tom. None of them are correct. The original reason that I understood for why I'd been called Posh Tom was... Okay. So there were 3 possible reasons. The first one is the one that I believed for the longest time because somebody had told me that it was true. The first is that on the Saturday afternoon at this Christian youth conference, there was a load of activities going on. Nobody knew what they all were. So I got a large sheet of card, wrote them all out, and then I turned it into a sandwich board and wore it for the rest of the afternoon. That was apparently sufficient to call me Posh Tom. Apparently that's not the true reason. So then somebody told me a second reason, which I think is actually far more believable, which was that there were 2 lads called Tom at this particular conference. One of them was from Rochdale, the other one sounds like this. That seems a more plausible reason. However, I was telling this story on the living room tour to the person, one of the people in the audience while I was out, was the person who actually gave me the nickname Posh Tom. And after the show, she went, "That's not why you're called Posh Tom." I went, "Oh, what's the real reason then?" And apparently, again, on the Saturday afternoon, they were serving afternoon tea, and I, at the age of 11, apparently said, "Ooh, hot buttered scones, my favourite." I have never loved scones enough to have said that. So that was my first nickname. The second nickname was when I was about 14 on a school trip at Northumberland. This nickname I've never understood. It was Tintin. Don't have a quiff, don't have a small white dog called Snowy, don't solve crimes in Belgium. Doesn't make any sense. The primary reason for this nickname, as far as I can tell, was for the sake of a song that could be sung on the bus. It's a very simple song, which is call and response, so I will sing the line, you sing the same line back to me. Are you alright with that?
Yeah.
Tintin,
Tintin,
lives in a wheelie bin.
lives in a wheelie bin.
That was it. The whole song on a loop for an hour. Makes no sense at all. And then my third nickname, which is perhaps the most baffling, which I got when I was 16, still don't fully understand this one to this day. That nickname was Gay Lion. Not gay, not a lion. Not that I have any problem with lions. I have a lot of lion friends. They read magazines like Maine Only. They meet each other on an app called Growler. Go out at the weekends to their own bars. They're called lion bars. And spend their weekends at pride festivals. Altogether or not at all. Don't get me wrong, I've probably got gay friends as well, but I don't know anything about their lifestyle. I am generally quite a quiet man, which is surprising to most people who think they know me. But I am actually not that... Excuse me. I am actually not that dominant a personality amongst my group of friends. If I am out on a night out and we're all sat round in the pub, other people will be dominating the conversation. I will be waiting for something funny to happen so that I can comment on it. That's my wheelhouse, that's where I exist. The trouble is, if the conversation is about something I'm not interested in, which in my group of friends is most often the film Marley and Me. I hate the film Marley and Me. Marley and Me is the film that says, get a dog, because it'll annoy you and then die. By the way, spoiler alert. But basically my point is, if there is something if something is being talked about that I don't care about, I will just go quiet, and then I'm not saying anything, sat in a corner. And it's at that point one of my friends will lean over to me and go, Tom, are you all right? You're not saying anything and you look upset. I go, no, I'm fine. That's just what my face looks like at rest. Some people have resting bitch face. I apparently have resting imminent suicide face. That's nice. I've never really felt especially comfortable in my own skin. As you may have noticed, I'm a slightly weird shape. That laugh would suggest you have noticed. And will cost me a further £300 of therapy, so thank you very much. No, I've never felt particularly comfortable in my own skin. Part of the problem is that I've always been tall. It's not like I had a sudden growth spurt in my teens. I've always been the tallest person. I was born at £9, and then I've just had a steady incline since then in terms of weight, and I'm now up to a point where I'm roughly 15 stone, which is quite a lot for a human, but not enough for a hippo. So swings and roundabouts. The trouble with my 15 stone is it's a lot like you've taken a photo of me and then put it, or taken a photo of 15 stone, and then taken it into Microsoft Paint to edit it, selected it, and then accidentally dragged it down and stretched the whole thing. Voila. So it's a bit of an odd thing. The 15 stone has happened quite recently, whereas suddenly, like in the last 2 years, I've gained 3 stone. The graph of my weight gain is extraordinary. Boom! As a result of that, I was starting to get a bit concerned. My uncle told me a few years ago, and he's the exact same body shape as me, but with a bit more of a tum. He told me I had until I was 35, at which point my metabolism would cease to be my friend and boom, tum. The problem with that theory is that he didn't eat anywhere near as much cake in his 20s as I have. So I decided I was going to have to do something about it slightly earlier. Unfortunately, because I'd never had to lose weight, I didn't really know how to do it. The result of that was I did a load of stuff which, as it turns out, builds up muscle, rather than cardio, which helps you lose weight. So I did the 30-day sit-up challenge. That hasn't helped at all. That's just pushed the fat further forward. Unfortunately, that followed the year before, where I'd done the 30-day squat challenge, which I realise is meant to be for women. I did it in order to build up my thigh strength for basketball, which worked. Plus, added bonus, cracking ass, if I do say so myself. Woo! It's like 2 melons in a carrier bag. It's the sort of ass that could stop a bus. I don't even know what that means, I just like saying it. However, the problem with that has been that my body is starting to look increasingly like a milk bottle. Wider at the bottom, gets narrower towards the top. Going to have to do some upper body stuff soon, otherwise it's going to look ridiculous. I mentioned all this to my mum over Christmas. She made me a hat out of tin foil. I went and sat on the steps outside our house. The milkman collected me as an empty. Never been so insulted in all my life. What was I going to talk about next? Oh yeah, the Bible. Shit, it segues. The Bible says love God and love thy neighbour. Now don't get me wrong, I like God and I like his work. I particularly like what he's done with Michelle Keegan. Quality. I find that joke all the funnier the fewer people in the room know who Michelle Keegan is. However, not willing to love him. Because, and it's really for a very simple reason, in my opinion, you should never fall in love with people that you've never met in person. Can look needy. So, imagine that you just started dating somebody and you were telling your mates about her and you were going, oh, I'll tell you lad, she's fantastic, she can do anything, I feel like she's always there. And they go, oh yeah, well where is she then? In all of us. That's very creepy, that's very creepy. Love God and love thy neighbour. Don't get me wrong, I'll sleep with my neighbour any day of the week because she's fit. But not willing to love her. And for the reason for that is that she's not returned my lawnmower. So, it was at that point that the vicar said, Tom, could you finish the Bible reading and sit back down, please? Apparently I was ruining the wedding. I'm sort of fascinated by atheism at the moment. We have turned atheism in this country into a religion dedicated to not having a religion, when in reality atheism should be no religion. It's very strange. A friend of mine went to the University of Sheffield where he joined the Atheist Society. Why? That is a room full of people with nothing in common except for one thing, their lack of faith. Which Darth Vader and I find disturbing. I don't really understand what they're doing there. The Atheist Society had weekly meetings. Surely one of the advantages of not believing in God is that you don't need a weekly congregation. It's got to be a time saver, surely. I don't even understand what those meetings were for. What were they doing? Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this meeting of the Atheist Society. I'll just go through the agenda. Item number 1, there is no God. That appears to be all for this week. Assuming there's still no God next Tuesday, we'll meet again. Enjoy your meaningless week. Speaking of things that make me think there is no God, Donald Trump. Segway! Donald Trump has spent his entire life in pursuit of respect, and he's never been able to get it. Not from all the buildings, not from all the money, not from all the women he's married. None of it's worked for him, except now he's got some respect, but it's from the worst people alive. Fucking Nazis. Who grows up in an age where Indiana Jones is freely available on DVD and still thinks Nazis are worth joining? Ridiculous. Did you see them at the rally in Charlottesville, where they were all wearing like beige chinos and white polo shirts? What were they trying to do? Redefine casual racism? Ridiculous. But I'm of the opinion that if somebody wants respect that badly, you really have to do everything that you can to take it from them. As a result of that, I've been working on an impression of Donald Trump. I will flag this up in advance. Not a good impression. But I think that helps mock him even further. I don't respect him enough to have put the work in. So, here's my impression of Donald Trump. Okay. I've been president for just over a year. No one's ever been better at it than me. We can all agree on that, okay? Everybody agrees I am awesome, all right? But there's been 3 things that I am not going to be able to fix, okay? Those are 3 things. The first of them is Veterans Affairs. That is always going to be a mess. Nothing I can do about that, all right? Second thing is the rising Chinese economy. I can't stop that, okay? Don't have that kind of power. That's all to do with China. 3, the drought in California. I can't stop that. I'm not God. Some people say I am. That's what it is. But I realise all of that's difficult to remember, and I know words. I know the best words, okay? So I take it all, I shorten it all down, I make it easier to remember, okay? I think of the drought as dryness, I think of the Chinese economy as China, and I think of the VA as Veterans Affairs as the VA, or VA for short. And now everywhere I go, I feel like I'm surrounded by them. I'm just surrounded by VA, China, dryness. It's a long way to go to get to that punchline, isn't it? I mean, it's just about worth it. Whilst all of the chaos of Donald Trump goes on, there remains one tiny little shining light of loveliness in the world, which is the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. I like to imagine at the moment that travelling across the Atlantic is like being in a little rowboat, and you can see nothing but black fog coming off America, and then you look slightly to the right and there's a beam of light, and it's Justin Trudeau in a lighthouse with a torch. Lovely man, lovely. He's done 3 things since he came to power that I've really enjoyed. The first of which was pretty much straight after we got sworn in, and he put 50% men and 50% women in his cabinet. And a reporter said, "Mr. Trudeau, why have you gender balanced your cabinet?" And he went, "Because it's 2016. Awesome!" That was the first good one. The second one, which I particularly enjoyed, you know that ridiculous handshake Donald Trump does to assert dominance? So, could you just stand up for me? Shake my hand. That. All right, you're trying too hard there. He tried to do that. Trudeau saw him coming, had clearly watched the game tape, which you've got to admire, and he just went, "You're not pulling me, fucker." Beautiful move. You've got to admire Trudeau for that. And then the third thing, which I really like about Trudeau, was summer before last. Trudeau was speaking at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, where he just pledged 50 million Canadian dollars to the further study of quantum computing. And one of the reporters went, "I'll try and catch him out." And they went, "Mr. Trudeau, can you explain what quantum computing is?" And Trudeau did, without notes. Boom! A mic drop from Trudeau. Imagine Trump trying to explain quantum computing. Okay. I've asked around, everybody agrees, okay, quantum computing is the worst James Bond movie, okay? It's not good, nobody likes it, okay? It's not good. He's a fucking idiot. You wouldn't believe how pleased I was when I thought of a second reason to do that impression. I'm gradually getting older, as are we all. I don't know what makes me so special. I am finding that in relatively short spaces of time, major things will change in your life, which is quite surprising, things that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. So I'd recently turned 29. 10, 15 years ago, if I got in trouble with my parents, that argument would probably have started with, "What have you done? You better not have got a girl pregnant." Whereas 10, 15 years later, we've progressed to, "What are you doing? Why can't you get a girl pregnant?" It's a very short window for that to have happened. I was trying to convince a girl recently that she should go out with me, and she was reluctant because there was a 7-year age difference. And she was saying, "Okay, think about it. When I'm 33, you'll be 40. And I went, "Yes, but on the plus side, when I'm 40, you'll be 33. That's a clear win. Trouble with that is that I have, as of this August, will have been single for 12 years. I mean, we're still primarily after laughs, but thanks. I don't really know why. It's not like I'm being overly fussy. I'm just looking for a 6'3" sweary academic who likes comic books and watches porn. Don't know why that's so difficult to find. Alarmingly, Dave Gothridge just put his hand up. I say that, I will of course, I think my major problem is that my real type of woman is one who is smart enough to realise that she can do better than me. That is inherently self-defeating. I take any of that or an Irish woman. Because they're exotic, but still local. Basically what I'm looking for is somebody who you'd never have to explain the concept of robot wars to. It's very difficult. I don't know if you've ever tried to explain robot wars to somebody. It's very difficult. It's weird. So, the concern is that in the last nearly 12 years, I may have started to misprioritise my life ever so slightly. This was brought home to me when, this is true, I had a sex dream in which I was not the person having sex. But, whilst other people were, I had a good gig. Let me say that again in case you don't fully appreciate how tragic it is. I was performing for a room full of people who were not expecting me, because the comedians who were supposed to be doing the gig, bit of colour for the story, comedians who I know, the comedians who were meant to be doing the gig were having sex in the wing of the stage. So that's concerning. Just to put the colour in the story for the rest of you, comedians in question, Joe Lycett and Aisling B. Not even a couple, so fuck knows what's going on there. My brain just unconsciously matchmaking comedians in its leisure time. Don't know what that's about at all. I do know what that's about. Joe's a friend and somebody who I admire very much as a comedian. Aisling also I admire as a comedian, but had a bit of a crush on her for a little while. So it's basically just my brain going, look at this, look at this. This is what you could have if you were funnier. Seems harsh. Yeah, it's possible that part of the reason I've been single this long is that I've got no moves. Don't know what I'm doing. I never learned how to transition between a platonic scenario and a sexual scenario. Another reason that I may be single is that I refer to it as a sexual scenario. Apparently that's not a good thing. So I just never learned what to do. I know I've got nothing. So basically what I'm saying, ladies, is if you ever find yourselves attracted to me, and historically speaking, that is not the commonly trodden path, but if you ever do, you'll have to make the first move, because I've got nothing. And don't worry about getting knocked back either, because this is also regrettably true. I have kissed women in the past purely because I was too polite to get out of the way. That is not a joke. I'm starting to make peace with the fact now, as most of my peers and contemporaries are starting to get married or have kids, I'm starting to make peace with the fact that if I ever do get married, I will probably be someone's second husband. Seems logical to me. I mean, like, all my friends getting married, 42% of marriages end in divorce. Theoretically, if I can keep this up till I'm 35, I should be hoovering up the punani by that point. Words I would never use off stage! Basically what I'm saying is I become a lot more attractive once your first marriage has failed. The other thing is that because my friends are starting to have kids as well, I'm starting to see the same meme appearing on Facebook quite a lot. It's one of the stupidest memes I think I've ever seen. It's sort of like a Saharan desert backdrop, and then it's just got the words, those aren't stretch marks, your body isn't ruined, you're a tiger who's earned her stripes. I mean, I've got three major problems with that. The first of which is, as far as I'm aware, none of the side effects of pregnancy are the sudden newfound ability to camouflage oneself in long grass. Secondly, I'm of the opinion that if you've just had a baby, the last thing you should bring into your house is a tiger. Very irresponsible, very irresponsible. And then my third point, and this is really my major one, tigers don't have to earn their stripes. That's a sergeant you're thinking of. Sergeant has to earn his stripes, that's how military promotions work. Ridiculous thing. Okay. A little over a year ago, a friend who I had previously been attracted to came to visit, who is American. So she hadn't been in 6 years. And it was sort of, in my mind at least, my equivalent of the one that got away. Others would tell you, I imagine that. However, when I found out that she was coming, and she was coming in the August and I found out in the May, I went, right, this time I'm not messing around, and I asked her out. Unfortunately, in the 11 years that I'd been single at that point, I have accidentally managed to become so subtle that I asked her out without her realising it had happened. So, win. As a result of that, she came over to visit in the August, and nothing happened. And then I'm assuming a mutual friend informed her of what was actually going on. And about a week after she went back to America, I was teaching my improv workshop here in Leicester, and just as I finished it, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out, I looked at it, I saw her name, and the words, "Tom, I need to talk to you," came up as the opening message. And I immediately turned my phone off and put it back in my pocket. I went, that's not going to be good news. And a friend of mine said, don't you want to read that? It might be important. I said, it might be important, but it is not going to be good news. Anything that starts with, "Tom, I need to talk to you," has the mystery equivalent of opening the box that contains Schrodinger's cat, when you can already smell a rotten cat. There is no surprise there. Sure enough, eventually I did open it, and it contained the phrase, "I just see you as a friend." Thank you. I've seen that message on a number of occasions in my life, and if there's one thing I hate more than being romantically rejected, it's a cliche. So I was somewhat irritated about it. I'm fascinated because I've seen the message so many times in my life. I'm fascinated that it's always the same message. It's always, "I just see you as a friend," but usually preceded by something in a bid to try and take the sting off. So it'd be, "Oh, you're such a nice guy, but I just see you as a friend," or "You're such a good guy, but I just see you as a friend," or "You're such a sweet guy and I'm a diabetic." It's always basically the same. And I got to thinking, how is it possible that this message can be identical every time internationally? That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I've tracked back through my life to the only point where I think this can have become possible. You know that bit at school in sex education where they take all the boys into one room and tell them about wet dreams, and they take all the girls into the other room, and I assumed we're telling them about periods. I'm starting to think that's actually just when they're taught to write this message, because it's the only plausible explanation. Nobody knows what happens in either room. The only point in my entire history where I've been separated from all women for an hour and I don't know what happened. So it's all deeply frustrating for me as an emotional cripple, because I have no proper way of dealing with that kind of emotional turmoil. Literally 36 hours after I got that message, I was on stage telling this routine. That isn't healthy. That's not a good way of dealing with pain. Just turn it into laughter for others to laugh at. That's the best I've got. It's not a good way of dealing with your problems. It's particularly problematic because then I just went, okay, well, what am I going to do instead? So I downloaded an app called Field, spelled with 2 E's. And for those unfamiliar with Field, that is Tinder for threesomes. Because I figured, if you're not getting what you want in life, you might as well shoot for the moon. And then about 2 weeks later, I deleted the app because it was only depressing me further. Okay, let's just decide what I'm going to do now and what I'm going to do for the encore. Okay. You think I'm joking? When I did my degree, because they don't consider creative writing to be a proper subject on its own, they make you do some literature modules in order to beef it up a bit. So in the first year I had to do an entire module which was about fantasy and fairy tales. So one of the things I learned as part of that course was that all fairy tales are written for the contemporary views and opinions of the time when they were written. And they've never really been updated. So some of them have got quite archaic attitudes buried within them that nobody really notices because we just enjoy the Disney princess versions. I'll give you an example. I use my favourite fairy tale, which is Sleeping Beauty. It's my favourite because it's got everything you could hope for. It's got a princess, it's got a prince, it's got a dragon, it's got a massive bush. It's got 3 of the 4 things I look for. Who needs a dragon? For those of you who've happily forgotten Sleeping Beauty, let me remind you what happens in it. Sleeping Beauty pricks her finger on a spinning wheel, and as punishment for this, because she's been told not to do it, she falls asleep for 100 years until woken by true love's first kiss. Now, that's obviously written in the 19th century at a time where women are expected to remain pure and virginal until they get married. So if we read between the lines, Sleeping Beauty has been told not to prick herself on a spinning wheel, does so anyway, and gets punished for it. Now, if we updated this for the 21st century version, I think it would be a much more compelling story, because Sleeping Beauty would be allowed to prick herself on as many different spinning wheels as she liked, provided she was wearing a thimble. Now, you can update all of them. It works across the board. Like Snow White, obviously in the original version, she goes to live in the woods with 7 dwarves until her evil stepmother turns up and gives her a poisoned apple, which she takes a bite of and then falls asleep for 100 years. Slightly repetitive fairy tales. Obviously that's written at a time where people are expected to do what their parents tell them. Now, however, I think it would be a much more interesting story because the evil stepmother would turn up, she'd take a bite of the poisoned apple and immediately sue on a breach of the Food Standards Act. And then a man from the council would turn up with incapacity benefit for the 7 dwarves. Challenge you to find in the other 800 shows at this festival anybody else who's ended a punchline with incapacity benefit. Hansel and Gretel. Obviously in the original version they're led into the woods by their father and leave a trail of stones and their breadcrumbs so they can find their way back. That wouldn't happen in the 21st century version. In the 21st century version they're led into the woods, Hansel takes out his iPhone, Google Maps the way home. Never even meet the witch in the woods. Rumpelstiltskin. 21st century version is incredibly simple. Doesn't matter who you fuck, just as long as you know their name. I have 2 punchlines for Rumpelstiltskin, because I also think it sounds like an STD. How was that girl you were with last night? Not bad, but I think she's giving me Rumpelstiltskin. Jack and the Beanstalk. Obviously in the original version, Jack goes up the beanstalk and he meets the giant. But he steals a goose that lays golden eggs and a golden harp that plays itself. That wouldn't happen in the 21st century version, because instead in the 21st century version, Jack goes up the beanstalk, he meets the giant, and he goes, "Wow, do you play basketball?" Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tom Young, thank you. That's very kind of you. I would never expected to have done an encore. I was in the dressing room, I had my shoes off. David went, "You're going to have to come back, Tom, they won't leave." Okay, fine. I see a lot of online pop-ups. Not because of pornography, but thank you for the mental note that you all just made. I watch a lot of American TV online, and as a result of that, see a lot of pop-ups. Some of them are weirder than others. A little while ago, I saw one which came up on my computer screen in a Windows-style dialogue box which featured just one sentence. "Would you mind fucking a slag from Wellingborough?" Now, because it was in a Windows-style dialogue box, there was one button that said, "OK," which backs you into a corner a little quicker than I would like. What I will say is, on the plus side of this, it is a pop-up on Microsoft and it's not the Office paperclip going, "I see you're trying to fuck a slag from Wellingborough. Can I help?" But the problem was, because it just presented me with that one statement, I didn't have enough information and I was left with questions. I mean, first and foremost, why would they start this thing with "would you mind"? As though they're one of those charity clipboard people you see in the town centre going, "Excuse me, would you mind just fucking a slag from Wellington?" No, she just needs £2 a month. I mean, secondly, I'm genuinely fascinated by this, is that why on earth would they go with such an aggressive verb as fucking? They could have gone with making love to or something like that, but no, fucking is what they've gone with, which makes me think you don't need to form any kind of emotional connection to said slag. You can literally just turn up, plough her and leave. Before I wrote this routine, I'd never used the phrase plough her before. I'll be honest with you, still don't think it suits me now, but I keep going with it. Next, I'm sort of fascinated by the fact that it says a slag, which suggests they've got one picked out for you. You would assume, I at least would assume, that there would be some kind of list you could look at, like a wine list, or some menu, and just go, "Yes, I'll have Chardonnay." The really odd thing about all of this is that this pop-up, I've seen it in other places. I was staying at my sister's house in Manchester, and it said, "Would you mind?" I saw it. It said, "Would you mind fucking a slag from Oldham?" So it just says the next town over. It's not even particularly clever in that respect. The problem is that because I live in Market Harborough, which is about half an hour from Wellingborough, So just the next town over. I was concerned that these pop-ups were working in tandem. And at the exact moment that I got that message, some poor girl in Wellingborough got a pop-up that said, "Would you mind fucking a giant from Market Harbour?" A very real possibility. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. You've been a very lovely audience. Do stay for the next show. Some of it's good. I will leave you with one actual joke. Would you like to hear one actual joke?
Yes!
Okay. What cheese is the biggest show-off? Cheddar! I do that joke a lot. A few years ago, I was performing at the University of Loughborough. If you're not familiar with the University of Loughborough, they get all the sports people. Quite an alpha environment. As a result of that, I was supposed to do a half-hour set and was supposed to do material. That is the only joke I did in the half hour because the rest was just dealing with hecklers. And so I got to the end of the set, I did that joke, and there was a guy sat roughly where you are, sir, who'd been sort of trying to interrupt me all the way through. And he heard the joke but didn't really understand the mechanics of it and tried to start suggesting alternative punchlines to me. He went, "Yeah, Tom, why don't you say ta-da Stilton?" I said, "No, that's not how comedy works. You can't just say ta-da and name a cheese." Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I've been Tom Young. Good night!